You're watching In Focus with Hindustan Times, and I'm Aditi Prasad. Big announcements coming in from Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman just a little while ago. 3 lakh crore, especially for the MSME sector, the micro, small, and medium enterprises. 3 lakh crore collateral-free automatic loans, equity support, revision of definition of MSMEs, and among a slew of other measures that were announced. In fact, this is the first installment of the details of the 20 lakh crore package announced by Prime Minister Modi yesterday. To be fair, a stimulus package for the MSEs had been a long time coming. In a survey done end April by an organization called Local Circles, which has a lot of MSME sector companies in its kitty, they said that 47% of the Indian startup and SMEs had less than 1 month of cash left, and they had no way to carry forward. Will this will this move revive business sentiment? I'm joined by Rajiv Pratap Rudi from the BJP, and I'm joined by Professor Gaurav Vallabh from the Congress to take this discussion forward. Let me start with you first, sir, Mr. Rudi. What is the benefits that you're likely to see from the MSME announcements today for the MSME sector per se?
Thank you, Aditi, and thank you, Gaurav. And we are here to discuss few of the issues. And I'm sure I would like to split it into two parts because the natural criticism would be what was your take-home package by this announcement. And that I would point out that if we talk about the take-home package, it was announced immediately, which was when the COVID struck the nation and was 1,70,000 crores, which was basically to create a line of cash flow to the laborers, to the villagers, to the PDS, and 3 months ration free, and gas cylinders free, and infusion of funds to the Jandan account, and so forth and so on, was the first package which was infused. So when people, and that would not have been sufficient, I admit, that can never be sufficient, but that was initially to start the line for those who would have gone into a immediate stress because of livelihood, a loss of livelihood, or maybe the day-to-day situation had changed. So that we leave that part. So if someone asks me that question, that takes it. As far as now carrying forward the industry and nudging back the economy back to normalcy. So the Prime Minister announced this 20 lakh crores. Now, out of the 20 lakh crores, the first package has come, and this first package deals with MSMEs, redefining MSMEs, 3 lakh crores earmarked for MSMEs without collateral, and then 20,000 crores for the MSMEs which are stressed. Then we go further down. He talked about RERA, where the exemption of date has been done for another 6 months. Then discoms, which were under distress, which could have created a major crisis in the entire power sector. So they were given 90,000 crores, government securitized it, and that would create a change right up to the people who are producing energy. Then we also had the payment of EPF for 3 months. Now the government has said that we'll do it for another 3 months into their accounts, and this would benefit around 72. This is one of those direct ones which was given earlier, and this going back to the pocket of those employees or those workers. Beyond this, we have seen how the EPF rate has been reduced for the employers from 12% to 10%. And we going further, we also have seen global tender has to be and the public sector undertakings, 200 crores and less to that has to be done within the country, so forth and so on. And IT refund, 5 lakhs has to be right away, and so forth and so on. Now, my submission here is, if you say this is about 5.5 to 6 lakh crores of stimulus which has come into the system out of the 20 lakh crores. I don't think it's the final one, and this because services and industries are responsible for about 68% of the GDP. 19% goes to agriculture. So agriculture is more or less has been taken care of. There would be much more to coming, but today it was basically industry and services. I anticipate in the next stage would be tourism and travel, which is again a very different sector, and maybe many more sectors to come forth. So this recipe is the beginning of what the Prime Minister has announced, and I think we will have criticism about what has been done and what needs to be done. But I think a great initiative and a great step has been taken. But I'm sure Gaurav would have a view on this. Thank you.
Yes, Gaurav, let's come to you. Obviously, you sit in the opposition, Gaurav, so obviously you will have a point of view on it. But we'd like you to look at it from a point of view of the nation suffering under such a huge, economic problem that we are facing right now due to a pandemic. In this eventuality, the 20 lakh crore announced by the Prime Minister yesterday and the steps announced by Nirmala Sitharaman today, where do you see that? How do you see the MSME sector specifically? Because she's going to detail out over the next few days other steps taken, but how do you see it so far?
Aditi, unfortunately, this financial package is turning out as a loan mela. This is not a right time for a loan mela. We require cash support mela. A farmer require cash support mela. A guy who lost his employment, a daily earner requires a cash support. A person, middle income group guy who lost his job or had a salary cut of 42%, 40 to 50%, he requires a cash support. I'm just asking, I know Rajiv ji had a lot of experience. Rajiv ji, in this 6 lakh crore rupees, can you share there is a single penny of direct support to anyone? Forget about MSME, or I'm saying anyone, including you, including farmer, including me, including a middle income group. Is there a direct support? Because what do you mean by support? Incremental support, the money which you are going to give in the hands of the people, because this is not a pandemic situation. This is not a normal situation. People require money in their hands, then only demand is going to be generated. And unfortunately, Aditi, in the last package, 9.8 lakh crore rupees is already announced in the first package, because they were saying 8 lakh crore is the liquidity infusion in the banks, and 1.7 lakh crore rupees they gave as a first package. 9.8 and today 6 lakh crore. Around 16 lakh crore rupees and already announced. My humble question to all your viewers, including Rajiv ji, sir, is there a single penny you are giving to a guy who lost his job? Is there a single penny you are giving to a guy who had a salary cut, sir? Is there a single penny you are giving to in the hands of a farmer? It is not a right time for loan mela or reform mela. We require money in the hand. People require direct cash support. Don't try to give them the loan. And the second point, Aditi, a small point. Then I will listen carefully Rajiv ji's perspective on this. Right now, outstanding loan to MSME sector is 10.56 lakh crore rupees, and they are already having the stress because of that loan. It's not that that loan is not having the stress. So, is MSME really require cash support in this pandemic situation, or are they require a loan mela from the government? And the last point, the point is just few days back, government had given a moratorium period on all loans, and now they are increasing the loan. There's a contradiction in their thought process itself. Just 3 weeks back, they gave a 3 month moratorium on all outstanding loans, and now they are saying that let's have 3 lakh crore rupees, 3.7 lakh crore rupees of new into the MSME system. Is this not the
Let,
self-contradictory? These
let
are
me
my
get
three perspectives.
let me get Dr. Rudy, who's also a former union minister, to sort of address the issues that you're pointing out.
No,
Dr.
can I come in, Aditi? Can
Yes,
I come
please.
in? You see, I was very polite when I said Gaurav. Uh, when you are talking about economics, you talk about economics because I, in a bit, understand economics. When you talk about politics, I can talk politics all the way down. And if you mix both of them, then a person like me can come back to you and speak much more than what you have told. And if there is a small disagreement on understanding what is a nation's economics and how an economy is nudged back to normalcy, and what are reforms, how tax cuts mean money in the pockets of the individuals who are getting those rebates, how a reduced EPF amount increases the liquidity of the companies which have employees, how a 3 month liquidity which is provided through the EPF by the banks, how all these concessions add up to liquidity in an economy, how the discoms, I do not know if we did not hear by part A, which I said that the government, which you talked about giving to the farmers and giving to the individuals as food subsidy, gas cylinders free, was the first instinct which was done by the government, if you remember correctly. and this was 1,70,000 crores. When you talk about loan melas, please try to understand no company is built on a grant. There is some equity, there is some loan, there is some enterprise, there is some partnership. And when that goes in distress, the companies are not asking, give me 5 lakh crores, give me direct money as a cash credit. No, they are not saying as a grants. Everything wants things to be incentivized so that they can get back to normalcy. Tax rebates, profits would be there, reinvestment would be done. So tax concessions which are given, or the loan which is given at a cost, or moratorium given by the banks, is with the purpose of, is a recipe to resume the economy. So when we talk like economists, let's talk about the economy. And as an economist, when we talk about a politician, I have a background of politics of 30 years. I can convert myself immediately into that. Sorry for being impolite, but let's talk about economics first and not about politics.
Economics first, not politics. Dr. Mr. Gaurav Vallabh, would you like to respond to that? Is the Congress, even as we are talking right now, the Congress is holding a press conference on this exact issue. What is it that the Congress, the direct subsidies, if you were talking about, or direct cash transfers, as Mr. Rudy pointed out, those cash transfers had been announced in the first trash, and this trash was specifically for the MSMEs. Where is it that you think that the government needs to put in more effort, where you feel that it hasn't been? Your audio is a problem, Professor Vallabh. We can't hear you properly. Okay, till the time we get Mr. Vallabh's Mr. Vallabh, I think maybe you can get your audio sorted in the meanwhile. We'll come back to you in a bit. Let me, in the meantime, bring in Mr. Karan Bhasin, who's an economist. Karan, what is your view as an economist? As Mr. Rudy was talking, that let's talk economics and not politics, because the devil is always in the detail. How do you see this sort of handout, this sort of handout to the MSME sector panning out in the near future?
No, so as you rightly said, the devil is always in the detail, and by now we already have a lot of the details out. And the key question that all of us have been asking ourselves, over the last couple of months, is that what is going to happen to India's growth because of the lockdown, post
Aditi is
COVID,
not
etc.
audible. I can't hear anything.
Am I? Yeah. Hello. Am I audible? Yeah. Am I audible?
Aditi, I can't hear. He's not audible. Unless you are audible, you can repeat it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Okay, carry on. Carry on. We can hear you.
Yeah.
Karan. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the key question that all of us have been occupied with over the last couple of weeks has been that what is going to happen to growth, and the key question right now is that what will be the impact of the stimulus or the announcements made by the government previously on growth. And by far, whatever announcement the government has made, even whether it's the previous announcement, this announcement, or whatever announcements were made by the RBI. One thing is for certain, that these announcements will definitely have a positive impact on growth, and there's no denying that. And let me explain why these are important. The key problem that a lot of people haven't discussed, and everyone watching will also probably get a sense of what the problem is. It's a cash flow mismatch. When there's a lockdown, what is happening is that companies, they're not receiving any cash inflow, because they're not able to operate.
Aditi, whatever Karan is saying, I can't hear, so you'll have to
but
respond. You have to
but
speak back again to me.
You can hear me, Mr. Rudy?
I can
yeah.
hear you, but nothing about Karan Bhasin, so
I
I'm sorry.
I will translate what Karan said.
Okay. Yeah. So the key issue is that MSMEs are not receiving any cash flows, but their outflow was continuing. So what did the government do? In the first sense, they came and said that we are going to give you regulatory forbearance. Your taxes will get deferred, and RBI then came ahead and said that we're going to give you a moratorium on EMIs. So it addressed a part of the outflow back then. And now what it has done is that it has decided to infuse liquidity into the system. It has decided that we are going to provide you credit so that you can rebuild your enterprises without increasing collateral requirements. And I think the biggest challenge that MSMEs have faced for decades in India is of capital, raising capital, and the government has finally given a sort of sovereign guarantee to ensure that they can raise capital. I do not subscribe to the views being given
There's a
by the
problem there.
person, by the professor, regarding the need to give cash handouts, because we tried that in 2008. It led to a disastrous situation. Macro fundamentals went for a toss. This is not the time to talk about giving cash handouts. This is not the time to try to talk about giving farm loan waivers, etc. Those policies we have done for decades and they haven't worked. Obviously we need to do a revisit of those policies, and I'm very glad that the government did not resort to fiscal slippages to the extent that they didn't go out and say that we're going to give cash transfers to everyone. They've addressed the problem in a very fiscally prudent manner, without compromising the long term or medium term macro sort of stability of the country, which is
All
equally important.
right. Yes, I get what you're saying. So, Mr. Rudy Karan, as an economist, believes that the situation, the cash handouts, is not the solution here. What is the solution is what the government has done, which is empowered the MSMEs in whatever manner they could in these trying times, and that's possibly the way to go forward. And from here on, Mr. Vallabh, if you can hear us, can you hear us? Your response to what, but we still can't hear you. Can you hear us? Yes, there was a slight audio that was coming now. Please carry on. No. Audio is very bad.
Aditi, the platform you must discuss with the technical team. The platform is not very compatible because we are having
No,
problems.
no. Actually, this is the first day that we've had problems. We've been using it for almost 2 weeks.
Okay, so sorry about it. Because I'm sorry about
Not
it.
a problem. There seems to be a certain problem with the mic.
So Aditi, I do not know the background of Mr. Gautam, but I didn't hear Karan. But if you said he was an economist, I would have agreed the same, because exactly what I was saying he would have said. And I think this is the recipe which is required. So the highlights of this highlights is that it is 2 against 1. An economist would be the best judge, and you are a moderator, so you would be also understanding. So having said so, I think the government this is the first step, and there are many more to come. I can always tell you with some finality that never ever a recipe would be a final recipe, and there would be fine tuning, because COVID has not come to an end, and Corona has not come to an end. It's a dynamic situation. We really do not know what worse can happen. It's just not the central government. The states have also to be responded. There would be requirement of the states. Funds have come down. GST collection has come down. The revenue of petroleum has come down. So there would be a lot of constraints. And meanwhile, the government has been bold enough to take these steps. I think there is a lot of inputs which has come to the government from the tourism industry, from the travel industry. For example, if you talk about travel and tourism. Now, travel and tourism, whatever impetus you give, unless and people start flying and international flights start coming in, for an economy like Goa or for a country like Seychelles and so forth, or a country like Mali, do you think anything is going to work out, even whatever amount of money the government has to give to the hoteliers? Unless and people go back to the hotels, and it's not going, the social industry is not going to be so easy for everyone to get back and then start using the facilities. There would be a lot of restrictions, and there has been a fear programming which has been there. So all these factors come together, and there could not be a final recipe, but this is a beginning, and there would be criticism. We are open to criticism, but not to sarcasm and not to unfound allegations of which does not have a base to discuss. So let's I'll confine myself to that, and the government has made a reasonably good effort. The first impetus has been rolled out. The first was done. This is the second one, and many more has to come in different sectors. So we'll have to look at piecemeal how it comes back, and a long way to go after Corona. Thank you.
Let me bring in Mr. Mani Shankar Aiyar. Thank you for joining our broadcast, sir. You know, Mr. Gaurav Vallabh was here with us a short while ago, and he had a lot of. He said, "Can you hear me, sir?"
I can just about hear you.
Okay, so Mr. Gautam Pallab was here a short while ago from the Congress Party, from your party, and he was making the point. He was making the point that that this sort of there should have been a cash transfer scheme announced with the 20 lakh crore package announced by the Prime Minister instead of the loan mela that has been organized by the government. What are your views on on the announcements by Mrs. Sitharaman today?
I have no idea what Nirmala Sitharaman said today. I was asked to come on this program on the basis of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's speech yesterday,
Okay.
and I haven't heard what has been said now.
Yes.
So
So
you should
she
either
announced.
excuse me.
No, please carry on your
No,
views on.
I really don't know what she said. So perhaps it would be best for you to excuse me from the show.
All right. Yes.
He's giving you, that is very honest on his part. He said
That's a
he's
very
not
honest.
watched it.
Thank you
And
for.
he's the one. So let's
Yes.
be practical with individuals. And I think that's a very valid thing Mani Shankar has said. He's not watched it, then he will never speak out of turn. So
conversation. Okay. So we'll come back to you later, and we'll make you have you back on the broadcast soon enough. Shobhadro, let me introduce Shobhadro. Shobhadro is a senior editor at Hindustan Times. Shobhadro, you heard what Mr. Rudy has to say.
Yes.
Your perspectives on what the announcements by the government today, by Nirmala Sitharaman, by the finance minister today, added up to, and how much of a boost is it going to bring for the MSME sector in our country? And because that is the sector which employs a lot of the working class people, and there was an effort to infuse liquidity in the system. Your opinion and your views so far?
Yeah, I heard Mr. Rudy, what he was saying. He's a former minister, and I think he summed up the entire issue. I think I'm audible.
Yes, excellent,
Great.
Excellent.
So I think the way he summed up the package which was been announced, a part of the package which has been announced today, I agree with him on most of the points. We have to keep in mind one thing, Aditi, when we are talking about MSMEs, that the MSMEs, there are about 36 million MSMEs in India. And according to the government figures, 31% of India's entire industrial production, which comes from the MSME. And obviously, it employs a large chunk, probably the lion's share of the people who are engaged in industrial activities. So it is not only the biggest employer in the industrial India, but also it is the backbone of India's industrial activities. The problem of MSMEs, to some extent, there have been two issues. One, obviously, the MSMEs in this cutthroat competition, they work on very small profit margins. So after the GST came, when all these, most of the, remember one thing that, most of the MSMEs, out of the 36 million MSMEs, I think almost like 20 million MSMEs, again, according to the government data, they are in the unorganized sector or unregistered sector. So, when the GST came, many economists had pointed out that the profit margin for the MSMEs had really, I'm talking about the initially when GST came, but then obviously the government made several amendments in the GST rules and the system which to suit MSMEs. There have been several changes. So initially when the GST came, there was, they hit the profit margin of the MSMEs. But later, of course, the changes were made. Now, what we are looking at is probably a model, and also one thing is that interesting data is that India has the largest number of MSMEs in the world after China. So when we are looking at Atmanirbhar Bharat or something like a self-reliant, the slogan which the Prime Minister has given yesterday, so we have to look at boosting our own capabilities, our own output, industrial output, services output, etc. In that sector, I think the MSMEs will obviously play a key role. And these are the big, they employ a whole lot of people, they produce in a large part of India's goods. So these boosts, and today the the package which has been announced by the government, it basically, what I see is that it has waived off almost 20% of the losses of the MSMEs in
Yes.
one of the decisions which they have announced. So I think it will go a long way. At the same time, everything, I think it depends, a lot depends on the, the how this lockdown is going to continue and what happens to the Indian economic scenario 3 months down the line. How the COVID, it's going to play a large part, a very important, I mean, it will be a major factor to consider. If there is a prolonged lockdown, especially in the larger cities, or in the districts which are now under red zone, uh, then we have to then the government has to probably rethink on what will be the next strategy. But as of now, the package looks promising. As of now, the package aims at the right space. But obviously we would have expected something for the the migrant workers or the farmers more. But I think some more stimulus is coming in the next 2 or 3 days for other sections as well.
Right. Mr. Rudy, let me straight off the bat, I have, two, three very straight questions for you as far as today's announcements by Nirmala Sitharaman is concerned. This mega MSME, this big bang MSME boost, really, is this, would you call it the first step to a self-reliant India?
You see, thank you very much, Mr. Chatterjee, for Saubhadra Chatterjee, to putting everything in perspective. It's very unusual that people agree to a non-economist politician what he says, but rarely I've come across people agreeing, but you have agreed, and even Mr. Bhasin has agreed. Having said that, and in case, I think you missed out with the first part when I said that this is the first package and I expect a lot to happen about migrant laborers, and we expect something for the travel and tourism industry, and I expect something for other sectors and agriculture sector as well, and the other sectors have to be considered. So it's just the first or the second part of the whole package. Coming back to your question, you see whether your question was whether this, and if I have to recall, you see the basis of what the package has been built up, the first package, and we have to get back always again to those 5 things mentioned by quantum jump in economy, infrastructure, tech-driven demography, which is migrant laborers and overall MSMEs and things along, and intelligence-driven supply system. So these are the 5 pillars under which the Prime Minister has planned the whole process through the economic process. So I think this is the beginning of that pillars which he has talked. And if you look into what MSME is looking into the quantum jump of the economy, infrastructure, tech-driven demography, all has been taken. So I think piecemeal all this would be taken. And it would be too early to make a final comment because end of the day, the banks have to give back this money. And the government has a big challenge to see that the banks start rolling out this money, which they have enough to lend. And that is what we are all aware. So that would be a biggest challenge. And that red tapeism has to be taken care of because I face it every day. Even as a politician in my constituency, the government is very serious about it. So facilitating banks to come back and say that, look, we have made you, we have secured you, we have securitized you. Now it's your time to come to the nation. And I think that is going to happen. And even this NBFCs companies which have been given this support and securitize their money is something which was very important. So as a non-economist, I would feel that it's a good job done.
So some would, and let me play the devil's advocate here. Some would call it a very protectionist policy. The whole the entire thing of not allowing global tenders to be a part of the 200 above 200 crores to be disallowed in government procurement. That some would call it protectionist in a sort of in a sense. Reminds you of the pre-90s era when you were sort of
not only that. This is a
yes.
GATT regime, and all these international bodies like WTO and all are going to have a tough time, and all these protectionism has to be, whether it's USA is there or any country now. I think the world will have to reinvent itself post-corona, and many of these agreements and counter agreements and treaties all will fall into major purview and sanctions. So I would not an expert, but I visualize as a politician that all of these things, political decisions, which were ultimately where economic decisions have to come back at a political level. So very difficult to say today, but if you see, there would be many things which we are doing are non-WTO compliant, but where does the compliance come? And so all these things would be, I would not be an expert, and I'm sure you all are also aware of it.
Exactly. But there's another question that I have on the changing the definition of SMEs, MSMEs. Revising the reason that they call themselves MSMEs, giving them a new identity definition. Investment limit is going to be revised upwards. Some
Net
say
is
that
doing a lot of mischief today. Most of the time you're cutting out as well, Aditi. But
okay.
When you ask this question, can you hear me?
I'm talking about. I'm talking
You're
about.
cut out.
Can you hear me right now? Can you hear me right now, sir? I think that's my internet bandwidth problem. Can you hear me properly now?
Lost you, Aditi?
Can you hear me, sir?
पीछे बैठते हैं बैठे हैं कितने बजे तब जाके 10 मिनट बैठ के आते हैं
All right. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, now you are there. Yes, please.
Wonderful. I'm sorry, must be the bandwidth problem because of this whole working from home scenario. We're all working with our own respective bandwidth. But I just have a question on the definition of MSMEs being revised.
Yes, I heard that.
Investment.
Yes, can I come back to it quickly? We have already been there for 32. Yes, what I wanted to say is I have to go into the nitty-gritties of that. What are the exemptions coming through redefining the MSMEs? And is the exemptions which are given to particular category and which would benefit them to grow and have more capital to infuse and more liquidity. So it's basically when you increase the bandwidth, which you are talking about, the threshold or whatever you call it, it would give more incentives and lesser taxes to the government. And so it needs to be scrutinized further before I can make a comment. But I can make out this is done to incentivize that industry.
Incentivize the industry and incentivize people to probably work harder and sort of grow their own outputs. And avail of more government stocks even as they do that. Thank you so much, Mr. Rudy. I'm going to let you go because you spent more than enough time with us. And I'm going to bring in Karan and Shobhadro here with us. I will allow you to leave us now. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast.
Thank you, Karan. Thank you, Shobhadro. Nice talking to both of you. Bye-bye.
Nice talking
Thank
to
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, same here. Thanks.
So let me, we had our political guests, so therefore we were, but sorry, Karan, I just came to you.
No issues.
Karan, so this whole, what I was asking him, that changing the defining, redefining MSMEs, investment limits to be raised upwards, additional criteria of turnover also being introduced. Will this not hurt the really small players in the business, give them a smaller share of the pie maybe? Or do you think the other side is what Mr. Rudy was saying is actually true, that they're likely, it's likely to kill the fear among MSMEs to grow and lose out on the benefits, therefore they're going to try harder to become bigger?
Look, I think we give a lot of incentives for people to be small, and we consider that small is beautiful, but the world we live in, it's all about scale and it's all about volume. So there was this excellent chapter by the current chief economic advisor in the economic survey, which highlighted this issue that most of the companies that are there in India, they largely remain small. And one of the reasons why they remain small is because we provide so many incentives. If I take the issue of labor, the moment you have more than 20 people, you have some or the other new regulation coming in, and it goes up till the time you hire 100 people, beyond which you cannot shut your enterprise. Even if you're making losses, you can't shut it without the permission of government, and government does not give you the permission very easily. So we are living in we are still living with the laws which were there before 1991, which were there for an economy that really incentivized a large informal production process, capital intensive, etc. And this at a time where we have a huge labor force, which is in either disguised unemployment or in the informal sector with practically no sort of job security, etc. So this entire approach that we really need to incentivize small, yes, we do need to give them incentives, but they shouldn't be at the cost of their growth. The incentives can be in the form of interest subvention or capital subsidies, etc. But to encourage companies to remain small, I just think it has been a bad policy that has been discussed for decades.
Absolutely. So you think this is a step in the right direction, Shobhadro? Can I just come to you for your closing remarks? Modi yesterday said that the COVID-19 has put India at the cusp of a historic opportunity, an opportunity to steal the forward march from China and probably bring it towards
Yes.
India, and a number of other opportunities to make India self-reliant and to make local global.
Yes.
Your views on whether the boost of the 20 lakh crore, which is 10% of India's GDP, if that is sufficient for this job to be done, or does India need more?
Okay, to answer the last part of your question, I think this is just a beginning. Although there are questions related to even this package, the number one question many economists have been saying that where will the money come from if the government goes for a huge stimulus? Where will the money come from? Will they print currency notes where they will borrow from the market? And both, Aditi, as we know, it has huge implications in common citizens' lives. At the same time, Aditi, I think India, the way the COVID, the pandemic has played out in the economic scenario globally, I think India is now looking to take a pie of the share which China has, historically enjoyed, or at least in the last 20 or 30 years, the China has the industrial, the growth of China has really boomed. They are looking, the government, as far as I know, when I talk to policymakers, they say that yes, they are looking to lure people who had invested in Chinese market in China, and now after the COVID, in the aftermath of the COVID, now they are looking to come out and invest elsewhere. They also say that India has to compete with countries like Vietnam, countries like Indonesia, Malaysia to some extent, if they
Right.
want to see many of these investors coming and settling their shops in India.
Yes,
I
but what
think
India has
the
to its advantage compared to these other countries that you named is a huge domestic market that they can cater to.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely. The biggest advantage of India is that 130, that huge 1.3 billion people. I mean, this is a domestic market which everybody from Amazon to anybody will love to come and invest in India and to, see their share grows in the market. So I think the Prime Minister is absolutely right when he is talking about that, local, focus on the local. Even in the earlier governments also, uh, there had been a long debate that, we should not be looking at the export oriented growth of economy, but we should look into the located into local demand. And that is the reason, let me tell you, Aditi, that yesterday Prime Minister of India in his address to the nation has said about this, that we go local and we talk about self-reliance. But almost 2 weeks ago, Prime Minister on the National Panchayat Day of India, Prime Minister said the same thing to all the Indian Gram Panchayats in a video conferencing, which was not reported widely because probably it was to the video panchayats, the Gram Panchayat ko bol diya to him. But he said the same thing. And Prime Minister, knowing the Prime Minister, the way he functions, I mean, the way we see him function, he has a long-term vision, no doubt about it. Nobody, even his staunchest critic, can't say that doesn't have a long-term vision. So when he is talking about the villages, the Indian villages, the rural India he's focusing on, that is an area which will be the growth sector, which will be the boost to the Indian growth market. And if India has to be self-reliant, it has to go back to the basic, that is to Indian villages.
Thank you so much, Roberto. Thank you, Karan Bhasin, for
Thank
joining
you.
us for the podcast. It's been an exceptionally long one. We normally wind up in about 20, maximum 22 minutes, but we had a ton of guests today. Some of them, like Mr. Mani Shankar Aiyar, who probably we could brief him properly about the topic of the debate too. So apologies for that. So we'll keep coming back to you with more in the meantime. Keep watching HindustanTimes.com.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.